Satipatthana Sutta has been coined by many people as the most important sutta that the Buddha taught. There's always reference to the Satipatthana Sutta with people that practice straight Vipassana, like that's the only sutta that they ever want to know about. But there's some real interesting observations and differences between the Satipatthana Sutta and what they're practicing. Most of the Satipatthana Sutta is talking about different stages of jhana. And you'll get a chance to see this pretty soon. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Kuru country, where there was a town of the Kurus named Kasasadama. There he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, Venerable Sir," they replied, "the Blessed One said this. Monks, this is," it says, "the direct path," and I changed that to "a direct path. For the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbāna, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Here, monks, a monk abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful. Having put away covetousness and grief for the world, he abides contemplating feeling as feeling. Now here, in this, it says feelings as feelings. But when you say it that way, it's implying emotion. And this doesn't have anything to do with emotion. It's feeling, not plural. Feeling is pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neither painful nor pleasant. So there's a little difference right there. Ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects. This is dhammas as dhammas. Ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Now we go into the contemplation of the body. And we start off with mindfulness of breathing. And how, monks, does a monk abide contemplating the body as a body? Here a monk gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or empty hut sits down, having folded his legs crosswise. I've never figured out which way was crosswise. Is it left over right or right over left? It doesn't matter. Set his body erect and establish mindfulness in front of him. Now this is a statement that an awful lot of the teachers look at and they say, you always have to have your mindfulness in front of you. And they never really talk about what it means. Having mindfulness in front of you means having first the definition of mindful that needs to be given. And then you'll see more clearly what it's talking about. The definition of mindfulness is remembering to observe how mind's attention moves from one thing to another. It's only observation. A lot of people, they'll give you definitions about mindfulness that are remembering to remember to remember. Things like that. I remember reading one article in one of the Buddha Dhamma magazines. They were trying to have a discussion as to what mindfulness was. And it was so cloudy that the writer at the end of the article said, and maybe next time we'll find out what mindfulness really is. But this definition that I just gave you works. It's remembering to observe how mind's attention moves from one thing to another. Now, keeping mindfulness in front of you means observing what arises. Remembering to observe what arises. Now, ever mindful he breathes in, ever mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. Did you hear me say nostril, nostril tip, upper lip, or abdomen? Why? Because that's not in the sutta. It says you understand when you breathe. You understand when you take a long breath and short breath. It doesn't say to focus on the breath to the exclusion of everything else. It just says you understand when you breathe in long and when you breathe out long. When you breathe in short and when you breathe out short. When you breathe fast, when you breathe slow. When your breath is very coarse or when it's very fine. You understand. That means you see it. Now we get to the instructions. He trains thus. I shall breathe in experiencing the whole body. He trains thus. I shall breathe out experiencing the whole body. This is not the body of breath. This is the physical body, the whole body. You feel your whole body on the in-breath and on the out-breath. The next part of the instructions are the key part of the instructions. He trains thus, I shall breathe in tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus, I shall breathe out tranquilizing the bodily formation. Now, what does that say? On the in-breath you relax, and on the out-breath you relax, right? How many people have practiced meditation without having that told to them? Yeah. Unless it was me that was telling you. Now, this is a very important aspect of the meditation that is not generally taught. It's not generally explained that you need to relax your bodily formation on the in-breath and relax it on the out-breath. And when you don't relax on the in-breath and relax on the out-breath, you have a tendency to take the breath as your object of meditation only, and that turns into one-pointed absorption concentration. When you follow the directions here, and you relax on the in-breath and relax on the out-breath. Now that can be big, gross relaxing. Sometimes you feel like one of your shoulders is higher than the other and you relax it. Sometimes you're holding your hand real tight and you relax it. Sometimes you feel like you need to cough and all of the muscles in your neck tighten. Then you relax it. But in this country, many people think that the body is from here down. And from here up is the mind. But actually, the body's from here down. And this is where most of the subtle tensions and tightnesses occur. You have your brain, and there is a membrane that goes around your brain. Every time mind's attention moves, that membrane tightens a little bit. And that tightness, in Buddhist terms, is called craving. When that tightness occurs, you have to let go of that. That's what it says here, right? Tranquilize on the in-breath and tranquilize on the out-breath. That means let go of that tightness around your brain, in your skull. And when you do that, your mind and your physical brain, they kind of expand a little bit. And then your mind becomes very peaceful and calm, very clear, very alert. And there is no thoughts. There's only this pure mind. And you bring that mind back to your object of meditation. And your object of meditation for this type of meditation is the breath and relaxing. It's not simply the breath by itself. When you add that extra relaxed step, when you're doing a mindfulness or breathing meditation, on the in-breath you relax, on the out-breath you relax. You start finding tensions and tightnesses that you didn't even know existed. There's two different sides of your brain, right? Now, there's membrane that goes down in between these two. As you release on the in-breath and release on the out-breath, you start letting go of the little subtle tensions in between the two parts of your brain. And you start letting go of tightnesses that you had no idea you had. That is learning how to let go of craving. So many people are teaching absorption concentration, where what happens physically is that membrane around your brain contracts, and then you focus your mind very deeply on one thing. Watching just the breath, just the sensation here, or here, for that matter. And you go through different stages of concentration when you do that. The absorption concentration has access concentration, it has momentary concentration, and it has full absorption concentration in it. None of these states will lead you to the cessation of suffering. Why? Because watching without having that relaxed step in it means that you're not letting go of craving. And when you don't let go of craving, you don't feel the cessation of craving. And if you don't feel the cessation of craving, you don't feel the cessation of Nibbāna. Of Nibbāna. Why? Because I am is attached to the craving. That means that you take the personal belief that what arises in your life and in your meditation is, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. When you let go of the craving, then you see these things just as they are. Oh, it's only this. It's not mine. I didn't ask it to come up. It came up by itself. Well, there's this sadness that arises. Who's sad? I am. Who doesn't want that feeling to be there? I don't. That's taking it personally. But when you let go of that craving, you see it for what it is. It's only sadness. What's that? It's easy to let go of. So letting go of the craving is a very major step that does lead to the cessation of suffering. And as you may or may not have noticed, I would hope that you have by now, notice that the 6 R's have a relaxed step in it. So what am I showing you? I'm showing you the way that leads to the cessation of suffering. This is the way, and it really works. And the more you relax into everything that arises, and the more you see these things as impersonal, the more freedom you have, the more clarity you have, and your mind naturally tends to be more peaceful and calm. So the relaxed step is a very, very important step in the process of attaining Nibbāna. If you don't have that relaxed step in, the way that a lot of Vipassana people talk, well, that's only absorption concentration. It doesn't lead to Nibbāna. They're right. It doesn't lead to Nibbāna. But that's not to say all jhanas don't lead to Nibbāna. The samatha vipassana jhanas do lead to Nibbāna. Anyway, just as a skilled turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, understands I make a long turn. Or when making a short turn, he understands I make a short turn. So too, breathing in long, a monk understands I breathe in long. And it goes through this whole thing again, which I'm not going to do. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally. He abides contemplating a body as a body externally. He abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally. He abides contemplating the body, its nature of arising. He abides contemplating in the body its nature of vanishing. He abides contemplating in the body its nature of both arising and vanishing. He abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how the monk abides contemplating the body as a body. Now we go on with this. Again, monks, when walking, a monk understands, I am walking. When standing, he understands, I am standing. When sitting, he understands, I am sitting. How many people know what they're doing right now with their body? Good. When lying down, he understands, I am lying down, or he understands accordingly how his body is disposed. This has always been one of the real question marks when I was practicing Vipassana in Burma. Because they said, well, you have to note when you're sitting down, so you know you're sitting. I don't need to note sitting down. I know when I'm sitting. I know when I'm not. Oh, but you have to note it anyway. Just 3 or 4 times, sitting, 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 sitting. Doesn't make sense. And then when you're walking, doing your walking meditation, you have to note that you're walking. And then when you stop and you're just standing still, you have to note that you're standing. I kept on asking him why. I know when I'm standing, I know when I'm sitting. Why do I have to make a big deal out of it? And I never got an answer. Anyway, they say that these 4 postures are so that you can understand what's happening with your body as it's happening. Okay. So we'll go on now to full awareness. Again, monks, a monk is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating, urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Full awareness of what? Full awareness of what? What your mind is doing while you're doing these actions. Does that make sense? So when you're walking from one place to another or returning, you know that you're walking. That's a given. What are you doing with your mind while you're doing that? Staying with your object of meditation, hopefully. Staying with the smile. Staying with that light sense of mind. While you're doing everything. Now you've heard me talk about keep your meditation going while you're eating, while you go to the toilet, while you're taking a shower, no matter what you're doing. That's what this is saying. Basically the same thing. Now we get into the foulness of the body. Now the foulness of the body meditation is generally for people that are really caught up in lust. They see another person and they just fall in lust for them. And going over these different body parts and contemplating these different body parts, this is what this is made up of, then there is a kind of balance that starts to happen in your mind, so you start losing the lust, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Again, monks, a monk reviews this same body up from the soles of his feet and down from the top of his hair, bounded by skin, as full as many kinds of impurity. Thus, in this body there are head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinew, bones, bone marrow, kidney, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, contents of the stomach, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. That's what all of these are made of. Now, I used to have a lot of college students when I was in Malaysia, and they were in their either late teens or early 20s, where they were really starting to come on to their lust pretty strongly. I think you can mostly remember those kinds of things way back then. And what I basically told them to do was, when you saw lust arise from another person that was very beautiful to you, I wanted them to turn that body inside out and start looking at their organs in their mind. Hey, you've really got a nice set of intestines. What a liver. Your joints, your oil joint is really fragrant. And so is the pus. Pus? Lust? You don't know what lust is. It's wanting to have sex. Okay, I want. It's not only that, but that's what I'm talking about right now. But it's any kind of very strong sensual desire. Okay? You got it? Okay. The whole point being, when you start looking at a person and their body parts, it's really not very appealing. Now, one of the things, because I was a monk and I was in Thailand, that I got to do was I got to go through a few autopsies. And that's really an interesting thing. Cutting open the body, and they just kind of hack it open and break the sternum, and then they pull the ribs out and they yank out the liver, and they weigh the liver, and if they had liver disease, they start cutting through the liver to see what the problem was. And they pull out the heart, and they pull out the lungs and the spleen and all of these different parts, and you start going, you know, I have the same stuff as they're pulling out right there. Where am I? Am I any part of these things? It's real interesting. And then they'll cut the scalp back like this, and they'll pull it off and just flop it in their face. And then they have a bone cutter. It's like a saw, and they cut open the skull and pull the brain out. And if they died of blood clot or something like that, or stroke, then they start digging through and seeing where it happened and why it happened, if they can guess. But it's a real interesting process, because you see all of these things and you start going, where am I? I know I'm not part of this, I'm not part of that body, but I have all of these parts and they're all the same, basically. And you start to develop a very strong sense of the impersonal nature of the body. So it's a real interesting experience. Now, there's one lady that she got hit by a car that morning. She was pregnant, and both the baby and the mother died. And they did an autopsy on both of them. And the lungs of the baby, they were pink. They were just gorgeous. Little tiny lungs like that. And you got to see, compare about, it looked like the lady had been a smoker at some time in her life, and her lungs were really black and kind of ugly looking. But to see these bodies being cut open and seeing that I'm not any part of that has a very big effect on you. At least it did on me. I'd go into the autopsy with other monks and I'd walk out and I'd be just contemplating, where am I? And they'd come out and they'd say, you got a real funny look on your face. But it was a big question. Where am I? Am I part of this body? Am I any part of this body? No, not really. Well, am I the mind? Where's the mind? Is it in the heart or is it in the brain? Where is mind? I don't know. I couldn't see it. One of the things that's very highly recommended for the monks when they first become monks is to sit and do this body contemplation for a period of time. Ananda wrote in one of his books how to do this particular kind of concentration. And it took about 6 months before you had gone through the whole body contemplation. This is doing it every day, forwards and backwards, and typical Burmese style of things. What that does is it helps the monks to overcome any sensual desire so that they can stay more balanced in their practice. There are some Catholic fathers that I happened to run across and talk to, and they were very much concerned about, this was at a time when fathers were getting caught having sexual activity with their young students. And they said, you know, we don't know how to overcome this lust. We don't know how to let this go in our personalities, and we all, a lot of the fathers get very much caught up in this kind of thing. So they said, what do you do? And I said, well, first I recommend that you go to some autopsies and check them out first. and then start doing this kind of meditation, and I wrote it out for them. And they thanked me with not great enthusiasm. I never know what happened after that, but I gave them, this is our way of learning how to stay in balance. Now, during the time of the Buddha, there was an awful lot of devas that were inspired to die out of the Devaloka and be reborn in the human realm so they could be with the Buddha. And the way that they die out of the Devaloka, they can do it very consciously. All they have to do is stop eating. In the Devalokas, they eat grapes, and they're supposed to be wonderful, and they just appear and pop. If you don't eat for one day, then you will die from that realm. Hopefully you'll be reborn in the human realm. But during the time of the Buddha, there was an awful lot of people, because they'd just come out of the Devaloka where there's a lot of sensual pleasures. They still had those sensual pleasures. And they still liked all of that sort of stuff, but they wanted to become monks and be with the Buddha. So the Buddha, right before one range retreat, he noticed how many monks were really enthralled with sensual desire, and he gave them this meditation. And then the Buddha went into 3 months seclusion by himself. When he came back, he started noticing there's not many monks around. And he said, why not? Where are all the monks? And this one monk came up to him and he said, well, you gave us this meditation, and so many people were so repulsed by their body that they committed suicide. They gave all of their robes and all of their requisites away, and they would just slice their throat and die, because they were so repulsed by their body. So doing this kind of meditation, you have to do it in a balanced way. And actually you need to do it with a teacher. This is one of those kind of meditations that it's best to have a teacher around. Anyway, he told all the other monks, don't do that. And he gave them the mindfulness of breathing meditation and other meditations to do instead of that, so that they had balanced mind. Okay, now we go to the next part of the body contemplation, and that is the elements. Again, monks, a monk reviews this same body, however it's placed, however disposed, as consisting of elements thus. In this body there are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. Now, when we go to Sutta number 62. Okay. There we're talking about the earth element. What, it's section number 8. whatever internally belonging to oneself that is solid, solidified and clung to, that is, head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, sinew, flesh, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, contents of the stomach, and feces, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified, and clung to. This is called the internal earth element. So you're talking, when he's talking about the body here, he's talking about the different aspects of the different parts of the body. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the earth element and makes mind dispassionate towards the earth element. What is the water element? The water element may be either internal or external. What is internal element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is water, watery clung to, that is bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, urine, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself that's water, watery and clung to. Have you ever felt water? Huh? Stick your hand in a bucket of water and tell me what it feels like. It's not hot or cold, because that's the fire element. What does the water element feel like? Stick your hand in a bucket of water and tell me what it feels like.
Wet.
What does wet feel like?
Stick your hand in a bucket of water, I say.
You'll feel hot or cold. Breaking the surface tension, you feel hardness and softness. What does water feel like?
It's more resistant than air.
Feel it. Do that, come back tomorrow and tell me. Stick your hand in a bucket of water and tell me what it feels like. I did that and it blew my mind because I couldn't feel anything. You'll see.
You weren't deep enough.
And the water element should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the water element and makes a mind dispassionate towards the water element. What is the earth element? Or the fire element, excuse me. The fire element may be either internal or external. What is the internal fire element? Whatever internally clung to belonging to oneself is fire, fiery, and clung to. That is, that by which one is warmed, ages, and is consumed, and that by which what is eaten, drunk, consumed, and tasted gets completely digested, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery, and clung to. This is called the fire element. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the fire element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the fire element. What is the air element? The air element may be either internal or external. What is the internal air element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. That is, upgoing winds, downgoing winds, winds in the belly, wind in the bowels, winds that course through the limbs, the in-breath and out-breath, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. This is the internal air element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the air element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the air element. What is the space element? The space element may either be internal or external. What is internal space element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is space, spatial and clung to. That is, the holes of the ears, the nostrils, the door of the mouth, and that aperture by which what is eaten, drunk, and consumed and tasted gets swallowed, and where it collects, whereby it is excreted from below, or wherever else internally belonging to oneself, is space, spatial, and clung to.
Back in the beginning, always they talk about internal and external,
Yes.
contemplating this, and each of they said, this is the internal element.
I'm just saying the internal, there is the external here.
Okay.
If you want me to do the external, let's see. Now, the external element are simply, the external earth element are simply earth element. See, that's why, that's why I didn't say anything about the external. They're talking about the physical earth, the hardness, the softness. With water, its cohesion. With air, its vibration. And with fire, it's hot and cold. Now, everything in the physical universe is made up of these four elements, and there are different degrees of these four elements. Okay. Now, this is the greater discourse of advice to Rahula, who was the Buddha's son. And he said, the Buddha said, Rahula, develop meditation that, oops, I went one far. Develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop meditation that is like the earth, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contact will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people throw clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus, blood on the earth, and the earth is not repelled, humiliated, and disgusted because of that, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop meditation that is like the earth, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like the water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people wash clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, spittle, pus, blood in water, and the water is not repelled, humiliated, and disgusted because of that, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Good advice, isn't it? And he goes through the fire, and he goes through the air. And then he goes through the space. That's why I read the space just a moment ago. Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation that is like space, arisen, agreeable, and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as space is not established anywhere, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation like space, arisen, agreeable, and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Develop meditation on loving kindness, and then we go through compassion and joy and equanimity. Now this is a very important sutta because it is very much encouraging you to not get caught up in agreeable and disagreeable things. See them for what they actually are. It's just feelings arising. And then your mind grabs onto it and says, I don't like that, or I do like it. And then you start thinking of all the reasons why you like or don't like it, and you get into the story, and you go further and further away from the present moment, and this is a source of suffering. When you start developing a mind that is like the earth, or like the water, or like the fire, or the air, when you start developing a mind that doesn't get caught up in agreeable and disagreeable. This is what one of the Chinese patriarchs said was the great way. To not be disturbed by things, by likes and dislikes. So the more equanimity, the more balance you have in your practice, in your daily life, the more ease and more contentment you have in living, in being in the present moment. Every time you get caught up in like and dislike, you're not in the present moment anymore. You're caught in some kind of delusion that these thoughts, these feelings, this thing, whatever was agreeable or disagreeable, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. Letting go of that and seeing everything as part of an impersonal process takes away so much suffering, it's unbelievable. Now, for instance, one time I was living in Hawaii, I was helping a man build a house. I wasn't getting paid to do this, I was just doing it because I wanted to hang out with this guy and help him. After a period of time, a couple of weeks, he started thinking he was my boss. And it really started to rub me the wrong way. And one day he said something and it really got me angry. And I started walking away from him and the heels of my feet were digging into the ground, and I'm thinking that no good so-and-so. He really is getting to me and I really don't like it. And then the thought dawned on me, he thinks he's my boss. And it made me laugh. And as soon as I laughed, I stopped walking and I went, wow, look at that. I went from, I don't like this so-and-so and what he's doing, to, it's only this anger, just because I laughed. The change of perspective from, I am angry and I don't like it, to, it's only anger. That's the difference between the personal perspective and the impersonal perspective. We need to develop the impersonal perspective in everything that arises. But the trick is remembering to observe. Remembering to see how these things arise and practice the 6 R's with them. Yeah, but it doesn't go away right away, so. And I don't remember anybody signing a contract saying you only had to do the 6 R's once and have things go away after that. Well, I have to do it over and over again, it's not working. Yes, it is. But you have to let go of the demands that reality happen in the way you want it to in your own time frame. See, the thing is, these kind of attachments, and they can be old attachments that you've had for a long time, they turn into habitual tendencies. And when that habitual tendency arises, there's this mind that's like that, grabbing onto it. And all of your concepts and all of your opinions and all of your stories about why you like or dislike or why you want to control, it pulls you further and further away from what is actually happening in the present moment. Now you're in a dream world. You're not awake anymore because of old habitual tendencies. And I always act this way when this kind of feeling arises. And look at how much suffering we cause ourselves and how much suffering we cause other people. Becoming more and more aware and using the 6 R's is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. You're following the entire Eightfold Path when you're practicing the 6 R's. So the more you do that, the more you start purifying your mind. And the more purified your mind becomes, the more balance you have in your mind, and the easier everything becomes. You start to become more and more content with what's happening, without having that emotional grab. Yeah, but this guy came in and he was angry and he made me angry, and nobody can make you angry. If you don't have any buttons to push, how can anyone have their buttons pushed?
Sometimes when I'm sitting, I have so much going through, I don't know what to call it.
Don't call it anything, just 6 R it.
Just
Just recognize Recognize that your mind is distracted, release the distraction. That doesn't mean change the distraction.
That doesn't mean it'll go away. 'cause
It
it's
doesn't
there.
mean it'll necessarily go away right away, that's for sure. But relax, smile, return, keep with your object of meditation as long as you can. Then you're going to pop back again. How strong is your attachment to whatever that is? How much are you believing that these thoughts and these feelings are me, they're mine, that's who I am? That's how long that's going to keep coming up.
Sometimes it just seems like a roar, like it isn't any particular thing that's.
Doesn't matter, six are. See, the why doesn't matter, it's how. That's why the hindrances are so important to us. Because they're teaching us how mind's attention moves and how we attach ourselves to things. And as you become more familiar with your mind moving from one thing to another, going from your object of meditation to your distraction, whatever it happens to be, your anger, your sadness, your anxiety, your fear, whatever, as you become familiar with this as a process, instead of this is me, this is mine, this is who I am, when you start seeing it as process, you're starting to see it in an impersonal way. And you're starting to see, there's this, there's that, there's that, there's that. And then there's this hindrance. But there's always something leading up to the hindrance. Your mind just doesn't all of a sudden jump from your object of meditation to the hindrance. It happens in exactly the same way for everybody. It doesn't matter what country you come from in this world. Everybody's mind works in exactly the same way. Yeah.
Can you reiterate, can you talk about how this practice works for everyone, especially for those who sometimes encounter doubt?
What is doubt? How does doubt arise?
In the mind.
How does it arise? There is a feeling and it's unpleasant. Then there's craving, I don't like it. Now, where the doubts really start to grow is with the clinging. That's with your concepts, with your opinions, with your ideas, with your story. And then your habitual tendency, when this doubt starts to grow a little bit and you start thinking about all the reasons why you don't know, you always act this way when these kind of feelings come up, when these kind of thoughts come up. And it causes the birth of action. Okay, that's dependent origination. That's how it works. You're depressed. How does depression occur? There's a painful feeling that arises, and there's an I don't like it mind, tightness, and then there's all of your opinions and concepts and reasons why you don't like that feeling. And then you try to think the feeling away. The more you think about a hindrance, the bigger and more intense the hindrance becomes. So the first thing you have to do is let go of your thinking about and relax. Then you notice there's a tight mental fist wrapped around that feeling. Now, feeling is feeling. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just a feeling. Allow the space for that feeling to be there without trying to change it, without trying to make it any different than it actually is. And then relax that tightness caused by the craving. And smile and come back to your object of meditation and stay on your object of meditation as long as you can. See, the biggest problem with something like doubt is you think you can solve the doubt by thinking. And that's not the way you get rid of doubt. You get rid of doubt by not thinking, by observing how the 6 R's work. Okay? And we can say fear, we can say anxiety, we can say depression, we can say sadness, whatever the catch of the day happens to be. It doesn't have to be doubt, it can be any of the hindrances. We treat it in the same way. See, there's contact, there's feeling, there's craving, there's clinging, there's habitual tendency, there's birth of actions. There's sorrow, there's lamentation, there's pain, grief, and despair.
Yep.
Why? Because of that not recognizing that tightness.
It's just the tightness.
Just the tightness. When you let go of the craving, all of the rest doesn't even arise. And it's hard to see that at first. It's very hard. But as you become familiar with it, when these wonderful hindrances arise, your friends, as you become more familiar with it and you start seeing it more clearly, you start going, oh yeah, this isn't oh wow. This is how it works. So, overcoming doubt means letting go of the thinking about that feeling. Because that's all it is. It's a feeling, there's craving, and then there's all of your concepts and opinions. And your story. And your habitual tendency, and birth, and then all of that pain and suffering. And the more you indulge in thinking, the bigger and more intense the doubt becomes. Why? Because doubt is a feeling. Doesn't have anything to do with thoughts. But you're trying to control the feeling with the thoughts, and it doesn't work. Okay? And this works exactly the same for everybody. If you're a human being, your mind works the same way as everybody else's mind. Boy, is that hard for Americans to take. But I'm different. Not really. So it's a real interesting phenomena when we get back to the Satipatthana Sutta about the elements. That when we're talking about the elements, we're still talking about body parts. And that's why it's in the section on the body. Now the next 9 Body contemplations are a little bit more on the gross side. And they are called cemetery or charnel ground meditations, where you go to where they bring a body. In India, it used to be, and they still do it a little bit in Bali. Somebody would die, they would carry the body to the charnel ground, and they would put it down and say, okay, whoever the relative is, they can come and take care of it. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So there was a lot of being able to observe a body after 3 or 4 days, how it gets bloated and how insects start to invade it, and then after a week, then you see the skeleton with just little bits of flesh on it, and it's just a progression of longer and longer decay of the body. It's hard to do that meditation now. And like I said, I had, the day before I left Bali, somebody told me about a charnel ground. There's Hindus on Bali, and they treat the body in the same way, and I didn't get a chance to go do that meditation because we were leaving the next day, and it kind of bothered me because I didn't get to do it. Isn't that odd? Yeah, let's go look at a rotting body.
Well, isn't it odder that you can see it on television any night of the week that you want to tune into?
But they only give you 30 seconds of it.
Oh. Maybe that's too much.
Well, if I was going to go do that, I would spend the entire day and night there. Now, I did go to a graveyard in Thailand. And I've never really thought much about ghosts and all of this kind of stuff. But when I got to Thailand, they really think about this kind of stuff a lot. And they're very much afraid of ghosts. And so I went to this graveyard because I wanted to do, it's a cemetery meditation where you sleep in the graveyard overnight. And I sat down beside this grave that had only been, this person had been in the ground for like a day and a half or 2 days. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I started hearing noises, groans. Oh man, hair on my neck stuck straight out, I want to tell you. And I was just about ready to run away. And one of the village puppies came and started digging in the ground where that grave was. And there's moaning and groaning, and what it was just gases coming off the body. And this dog is starting to dig around because he wants something to eat. And I thought, if that dog's not afraid of those sounds, why should I be? No ghost is going to eat me alive tonight. But there is something in one of the suttas that talks about what you do with when you have fear arise. And the Buddha gave us very clear direction. He said, whatever posture you're in, when fear arises, don't change that posture. And stay there until the fear goes away. So I was in Thailand, and I was in the forest by myself. I was a little Cootie that was 2 or 3 miles away from town. And I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, decided I was going to go out and do a walking meditation. Now there's no electricity around, so I had a couple candles and I put one at one end of the walkway and one at the other end of the walkway. And I started doing my walking meditation, and out of the corner of my eye I saw something. And I stopped and I went, do I really want to be out here doing this walking meditation right now? And I thought, well, okay, we'll continue. So I didn't even get one more step in, and I saw something out there again. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was really considering going back into my cootie and hiding underneath my robes. And then I remembered that the Buddha said, don't change your posture, and I'd stopped, so I started walking again. And I had my head turned a little bit, and I saw a flash of light. Oh, man. They're coming for me, you know, these yuccas they're gonna eat me alive, these ogres, whatever. And I thought it was kind of interesting as I was walking, so I turned my head all the way and I saw fireflies. I built up those fireflies into the biggest, baddest ghosts that were going to eat me alive. You see how ridiculous that was? So, what we want to do is learn how to get in balance with whatever kind of mental state that arises. And treat everything like the earth, or everything like the water, or the fire, or the air. So you don't have likes and dislikes when disagreeable things arise, or agreeable things arise. The more balance you can put into your practice and into your way of observing things, the less suffering you will experience. It's just that simple. And practicing the 6 R's is the way to do that. Yes.
I haven't been sleeping well. The first Dhamma talk that you gave, you mentioned that doing this loving kindness meditation, you sleep better.
Yes?
But that perhaps you encounter something in your dream, and to send it loving kindness.
Yes.
And actually that scared me. I really don't know what you meant by that.
Do you know how to radiate loving kindness?
Yes, but I
Okay,
don't know what you're talking about.
if you have a dream and it's not a pleasant dream, then radiate loving kindness.
Okay,
That's what it means.
okay.
Really, there's nothing to it. But your sleep will start to be better. But if you wake up in the night, get up. I don't mean get out of bed, I mean just sit in bed. Put the covers around you and start practicing your loving kindness. And then when you feel sleepy, then lay down and go to sleep again. Okay? When the rule of thumb for a meditation retreat is when you wake up, get up. And you can sit in the bed. Sometimes you'll not want to break your sitting to get up and go to the first sitting in the morning. Sometimes you'll just do that for 10 minutes and your mind says, oh, let's lay down and go back to sleep. And that's fine either way. Okay? Okay. I'm going to give a short Dhamma talk today. The rest of the Satipatthana Sutta is I'm going to go through that tomorrow, because it just takes too long to go through this whole sutta at one sitting. And that would take away from your opportunity to do more practice. Okay, does anybody have any other questions or comments or whatever?
Question, so are the 5 hindrances essentially different aspects of feeling?
Yes. The restlessness can be either a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling, and it's the same with all of the hindrances. An example of restlessness being a pleasant feeling is planning.
The accountant in me does come up with that.
Okay, yes.
It's a small point, but it's always bothered me. The Sutta says to sit cross-legged, and he didn't say sit cross-legged or on a chair if that's more comfortable.
You have to understand that during the time of the Buddha, or even if you go into Burma or Thailand now, they don't have any chairs. They're used to sitting on the floor. They're used to sitting cross-legged. We were not brought up that way. We were brought up to be sitting in chairs. You can work very hard and go through an awful lot of pain and be able to sit cross-legged on the floor. But does that lead to good meditation? There's no magic on the floor. If it causes you a lot of pain, then sit in a way that doesn't cause pain to arise. And for Westerners, sitting in a chair is very comfortable. I had a friend. She was a very virtuous woman that she wanted to learn meditation. So I told her to come for a retreat. I was giving one on the weekend. And after the first, I'd given her the instructions. After lunch, I went and I talked to her and I said, well, how's your meditation going? And she said, well, it seems to be going all right. How long are you sitting? I can only sit for 45 minutes. Ah, only. So I said, well, why don't you sit longer? And she said, you know, I'm not used to sitting on the floor and the pain in my knees is just awful. And I can only stand it for 45 minutes before I have to get up. So I said, well, sit in a chair. Just don't lean heavily in the chair. Her next sitting was 4 hours. She got into the first jhana. See, having the pain is not necessarily a good thing. It's a distraction. And you can practice sitting cross-legged. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor for a long time. And I had a teacher that kept on saying, why don't you sit longer? So I was sitting for long periods of time. And I developed blood clots in my legs. Thank you very much. That I've just recently figured out how to take care of it, so I don't have these problems. But it took me more than 15 years to get rid of the blood clots in my legs. I couldn't sit on the floor now for any length of time. They're built differently than we are because they're used to sitting on the floor. Their hips are a little bit different than ours. I mean, the physiology is there. So it's your choice what you want to do. Does it interfere with your meditation or not? Do you want to sit with pain and use pain as your meditation? It's not a comfortable thing. Are you going to get to Nibbāna by experiencing all this pain? No, because you start identifying with the pain. It's hard to sit with pain. Your mind goes like that. It becomes a rock. So it's up to you. You can follow what that said. There's a difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And sometimes I bounce back between one and another for whatever is appropriate at the time. Okay, did that help?
Yeah, it raised one other question. With the pain, so if you're sitting and there's pain, it seems natural to stand up to relieve it if it gets too bad, but the instruction is to stay still.
Now this is within reason, and there are two different kinds of pain. One is meditation pain, and the other one is real pain. The only way you can tell the difference is you have a lot of pain, say you have a pain in your knee, okay? Meditation pain is you get up and you start walking and within 3 steps you don't even remember you had the pain. Real pain is that doesn't go away, okay? Don't sit that way if it's a real pain. Sit in a way that doesn't cause the pain to arise. Now, I've had meditation pains for years. I felt like somebody took a knife and stabbed me right in the arm. And there wasn't any position that I could use while I was meditating that there wasn't extreme pain. But when I got up and started walking away, there was nothing. Finally, it just went away by itself. I burned that karma out. I probably wound up stabbing somebody in the arm at one point or another.
That must have been relief.
It was. And of course I was doing all kinds of things to it, thinking that I could heal that. So I was putting healing oils on it, and I was doing all kinds of stuff. None of it worked. So sit in a way that doesn't cause real pain. Yes.
Well, isn't it true that the Buddha would lie down at times because he had pain in his back?
Yeah.
So he meditated lying down.
Yes, definitely.
So there isn't any prescribed posture that you have to have
Right.
that way.
For monks, we are taught to sleep on our right side. And that's the way the Buddha, when he laid down, he always laid down on his right side. And the reason for that is your heart needs to have nothing pushing against it. If you lay down on the left side, you have lungs and stuff that start pushing against your heart. You lay down on the right side, and it's open, and it's much more comfortable. And I've developed this habit so that I can read a book for hours and then say, okay, it's time to go to sleep. Put the book down, turn the lights off, get on my right side, within 5 seconds I'm asleep. I mean, I toss and turn for a good 5 seconds. But that's because I've developed that habit over the years of sleeping on the right side. If I try to go to sleep on the left side, I don't sleep. I'll lay there awake. I go on my right side, that's it. So when you're picking your posture, pick a posture that doesn't cause you real physical pain. that's one of the problems that I had when I went to Burma, and I started a retreat. I'll give you the whole story. I started a retreat with this one teacher, and the first day of the retreat I walked into the interview and he said, "How long did you sit?" I said, "I sat for an hour and I walked for an hour. That's prescribed." "Okay." He said, "Why don't you sit longer?" I said, "Okay." I came in the next day. He said, "How long did you sit?" I said, "I sat for 2 hours, walked for an hour." I said, "Okay. Why don't you sit longer?" Okay. Came back the next day. "How long did you sit?" 3 hours. It was a killer. "Don't want to do that again." "Okay. Why don't you sit longer?" "Oh, man. Okay, I'll try." Come in the next day, tears coming down. So much pain. "How long did you sit?" 4 hours. It was a killer. Walk for an hour. "Did you move while you were sitting?" "Yeah, I was moving all over the place. It was painful." "Well, don't move." "Okay, we'll try." I came in the next day. "How long did you sit?" "I sat for 4 hours. Did you move?" "No." "I never want that experience again." "Why don't you sit longer?" "No." "I'm not going to sit any longer. That's it." But eventually he coerced me into sitting for 6, 7, 8 hours without moving. And that's why I developed these blood clots in my legs, because I was sitting. It's just like a hose, you know. If you put a crimp in the hose, you don't get any water through it. Well, that's what was happening to my blood vessels. It was not a natural way of developing the meditation. I have had students that they can sit for that long, but they don't have any physical problems when they sit that long, because they just developed over a period of time in a very natural way to sit longer and longer and longer. And anybody that was sitting long periods of time, when they got up from that sitting, I made sure that they were getting their blood circulation moving. And that's when I started telling people you have to do your walking meditation going up and down stairs. And you can't do it for any less than 30 minutes. And I want you to do it fast, so that you're puffing. That put balance back into their body. So the whole thing comes down to actually not necessarily following what a teacher says, but following what your body is telling you. If you're sitting in a particular way and there's really extreme pain, and you get up and that pain doesn't go away, please do not sit that way again. I don't want anyone to wind up with physical problems. Okay? Any other questions?
Are you interested in esoteric questions or not at this point?
Let's save that for more towards the end of the retreat. Okay? Okay, let's share some merit then. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas and mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensations. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.